And who has more fun? Well, boy, the dinners at Basil were, I mean, they were crazy, right? Very good wine. Yeah.
Go and tell the story. Tell it.
Well, okay, this is a long time ago. In fact, it was 2 weeks into the job at Governor of the Bank of Canada. It's February 2008. And I go there, and Bear Stearns is collapsing. It seemed like a big deal at the time. In retrospect, it was like, that's nothing, but it was a big deal. And we had to decide, because Asia, typical Asia was going to open. And so we go to this dinner, and it's called the G10 Central Banks. So it's the core group of central banks, and Jean-Claude Trichet is the chair. We show up, and we have an hour and a half to make a decision about flooding the system with liquidity or shutting certain things down, etc. It was pretty complex, but we're around this dinner table. It's like a 7-course meal. And Trichet spends the first 10 minutes. He welcomes me, which I thought was nice. Mark, welcome. And then he says, we have the best wine in Europe at this dinner. And so
it's a detail. Who cares? Who cares? I don't.
Welcome back to another episode of Stand on Guard. I'm your host, David Crayden, and we're going live to you from Ottawa, as we do 7 days a week. Glad we're on time this morning. Thanks for joining me. I've got some extraordinary clips to show you. I don't usually like to do just a lot of clips. I criticize some people for doing that. But what Pierre Poilievre has said in the last 48 hours is absolutely phenomenal. So stay tuned. You're watching Stand on Guard. The channel is Crayden's Right, and we've got a lot more to show you.
The Prime Minister lied, and his minions continue to lie.
Your home is your castle. We're calling on the government to introduce and immediately pass the Stand on Guard law.
But we also need to resolve to resist.
Okay.
We'll do it live.
Okay. Well, no.
We'll do it live. I'll write it and we'll do it live.
So I always like to tell you that I'm in nobody's pocket. And I'm not. I never will be. But I also like to say that when Pierre Poilievre says or does something extraordinary, I will recognize it. And I will say, you're on your game. You're doing the right thing. You're saying the right things. You are articulating good policy. And you are resonating with not just conservatives, small c and large c, but libertarians as well, common sense people, and ordinary Canadians of all shapes and sizes and political stripes. And what Pierre Poilievre said recently in his European tour, and I must confess, over the last few days, I was not paying attention to Pierre Poilievre's European stops. I was watching the intervention in that Middle Eastern country, which, believe it or not, we can't even talk about, or else we get in trouble for doing that. So we're not even going to be talking about that situation there in the Middle East. I think we can still say Middle East without being penalized for doing it. So we'll go that far. We're going to be talking about Pierre Poilievre today and what he's doing right and how he will win the next federal election. Despite this, I saw this is a Leger poll out this morning. And 49% voter support for the Liberals. That's as high as they've been since the first year of Justin Trudeau. When a lot of people thought Justin Trudeau was just doing a marvelous job. 59% support approval rating for Mark Carney himself in this poll. So I'm sorry, what does that tell you? It tells me that too many Canadians are not getting the news about Mark Carney's corruption, that he's in this for Mark Carney and for Brookfield Asset Management, that he's using our pension funds to leverage trade deals, that this is the most corrupt government perhaps in Canadian history. So share not just my broadcast, I encourage you to share mine, but share these broadcasts with your friends and family. Let people in your sphere know and understand how corrupt Mark Carney's government is, because clearly it's not getting through to enough Canadians. When this guy enjoys almost 60% approval rating and his government and his party is getting 49% voter support, something's wrong. When we have indications that the race is almost evening in Alberta, there's something seriously wrong. And I know it's easy to dismiss all of these polls and say, can't be right. The amount of alarm in these polls is high enough that I think there's something there we have to recognize and we have to acknowledge. Just on a personal side here, because I tend to forget personal things when I do a broadcast because I get so focused on the news. There's so many of you who are good, praying Christians who watch this broadcast. I ask for your prayers today. My mother is in Chilliwack, very near death. She might rebound. She's done it in the past. But I had a phone call yesterday. Once again, no warning from the people there, and family is not close anymore. As I've shared, my sister, who was very close to her in Chilliwack, passed away. She has a grandson about 2 hours away, and he went to see her last night. I have to decide what to do, but I have been on my knees praying for the health of my mother, and I ask you to do that too. Those of you, I know there are so many of you who contact me and let me know that you do that. And for being there. And I think of so many of you, as I said, who have reached out to me in the past. It's a difficult time. And I've shared this, obviously, with a few people. I'm sharing it publicly today because I don't really care what your denomination is or even where your faith is. I just ask for your prayers to the Most High, to God. And I thank you for doing that. And I believe in the power of prayer. I believe when enough people join together, even if they're not in the same room, that miracles are possible. And I thank you for being a part of that miracle. So thank you for watching today. And thank you for allowing me to share that personal bit of business with you. Yes, I am, of course, very, very heartbroken about this right now. My mother and I have been very close over the years. She's probably the greatest influence in my life. And I think it's one of the reasons I have such high respect for women. And right now, I think some of the people I respect most in this world, in this country, are courageous women. And my mother was always a courageous woman. Never afraid to talk about her ideas. Never afraid to be outspoken. Never afraid to do the right thing when it was necessary. So thank you again. I want to get on to Pierre Poilievre here, because I think what Pierre is doing right now is defining himself as, again, as a principled conservative who understands the base of the party, who understands what Canadians want. So let's listen to some of this. This is his latest speech from Berlin, where I think he articulates trade policy very well.
My government will use
the constitutional and legal powers necessary to pre-permit right-of-ways for pipelines and LNG liquefaction terminals. We will override bureaucracies and other levels of government if needed to get projects approved and under construction. We will also move to 6-month permitting times for major projects like LNG. We will commit all of this in a binding agreement with willing European allies to guarantee you the energy you need from a friend you can trust. This will make us stronger at home and unbreakable abroad. So what I am proposing to you, our German friends, today are 2 things. First of all, a supply agreement for natural gas that will require our government rapidly approve liquefaction facilities and pipelines to supply you with a predictable, low-cost source of natural gas into the future. Second, my future government plans to create a strategic reserve, mineral and energy reserve that will be available to our allies in the case of war or other crises. We would make this available to our German friends as part of an enhanced trade relationship. These 2 steps would help secure your present energy needs and create contingencies for any minerals that you might require if, God forbid, we were jointly involved in a conflict against a shared enemy.
It gets better, and I'm saving the better material for later in the show because I'm frankly absolutely amazed that Pierre Poilievre is coming out in such a direct fashion right now. He's not looking at the polls. He's not saying, oh, Mark Carney is going to win the next election. He's looking at the polls and saying, we can beat him. Because polls just represent one day in time. And I believe that if Pierre Poilievre continues to talk like he's talking in these clips I'm about to show you, he will be the next Prime Minister of Canada. So here he is speaking at a Margaret Thatcher symposium. And the introductory speaker, the speaker who introduces Mr. Poilievre, says exactly what I said when I first listened to his speech. And I had not heard the introduction. I watched the speech. And I said, hey, Pierre Poilievre obviously not just knows this material because he's been told how to know the material. He has read the material. He knows Adam Smith. He knows Milton Friedman. He knows this literature very well because he's read it. He understands it. And I think he's ready to say, here's where Canada needs to go. This is about, as he says in one of these clips later on, in a fantastic interview he does for Triggermometry, a great talk show out of the UK. He says it's a choice right now between freedom or force. Either we have our freedom or the government forces us by coercion to do what they want. This is a very, very good message.
No, we invited him for 2 reasons. The first is because of the philosophy and principles he espouses. Pierre is one of those rare politicians who not only cites Adam Smith and Milton Friedman, but has actually read them. When he was asked in 2019 what event, book or song had made the biggest impression on his political thinking, the answer he gave was Friedman's Capitalism and Freedom, which he read as a 14-year-old in Calgary and set him on the path to where he is today. In 2008, as a young MP, he argued that the wealth of nations was as important as the US Declaration of Independence in shaping the modern world. Those are answers I feel Baroness Thatcher would have very much approved of. But like Lady Thatcher, Pierre has applied those great economic insights to the problems of today. The conservatism he champions is one that is based on the working classes and working people, on fixing problems so that young people stuck living in their parents' basement have the jobs, the opportunities and, yes, the housing that they need to thrive. It is a conservatism that squares the circle between traditionalism and populism, that looks and speaks to the future rather than the past. And it is a conservatism that resonates with the Conservatives under Pierre's leadership, winning a record number of votes in the recent federal election, and surely winning many more had it not been for a certain noisy neighbour to the south.
Squares the circle between traditionalism and populism. I've not heard that description before. I think that might be key to Pierre Poilievre in the Conservative Party winning the next election. And I make no bones about the fact that in this next election, if Mark Carney wins, and if we have much more of Mark Carney, this country is finished, because we're going to see at least one province separate, and we're going to see this country's economy in the tank. And wanted to say this because once again, I will forget to say this if I don't mention it now. I know a lot of you disagree with me about the intervention in the Middle East. That's fine. I think I'm right about this in terms of foreign wars being a bad thing. But I want this war to end as soon as possible. And I in no way wish any harm on those Americans fighting in theater. I want this to be successful and to end quickly. But quickly is where I put my emphasis. Because the longer this war goes on, the greater likelihood that the world economy is going to descend into perhaps a Great Depression. And this is going to hurt all of us. So we want this war to be over. And that's all I'm going to say about that today. Here's some more fantastic. This is what Pierre talked about at that Thatcher symposium.
Everything government does, it does by the force of mandatory taxation. Even the things we agree it must do, like fund a military, it has to be done through the coercion of the state. And that's why no one writes thank you on their tax forms. And even though theoretically it's supposed to be a transaction, you don't get the same mutual gratitude that you do in a free exchange. Now, even though we are in England, I hope I don't create a diplomatic incident by quoting a great Scot to kick off my remarks. But this Monday will be the 250th anniversary of Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations. I like that. Hey. We got to get some of that in our House of Commons. As he wrote, what is prudence in the conduct of every private family can scarce be folly in that of a great kingdom. Put simply, when people can decide what to do for themselves, they make themselves and all of us better off. What is good for the parts are even better for the sum. Free exchange is the key to the well-being of commoner and country. As he said, commerce ought naturally to be among nations, as among individuals, a bond of friendship. His books were long, but his principles simple. Free trade, free markets, free nations. And that is the theme of this speech. Canada must become stronger at home so that we have unbreakable leverage abroad. Opening trade with like-minded free nations will do that by diversifying markets, lowering costs for consumers, and boosting wages for workers. Smith is probably the best known and least read economist. For that reason, he's often misunderstood. If you Google father of capitalism, his name and face will pop up. Yet the word capitalism or capitalist does not appear in either the Wealth of Nations or in the theory of moral settlements. He never used the term. He did not preach the supremacy of capital over labor, but the free and voluntary exchange of the two. Indeed, he believed that labor was the core of all value. And, quote, the annual labor of every nation is the true source of wealth. And he warned against profits earned through state protection rather than open competition. Nor did he glorify greed. When he wrote that we expect our dinner not from the benevolence of the butcher, brewer, or baker, but from their own self-interest, he was not glorifying greed, but rather describing obvious incentives. In the theory of moral sentiments, in fact, he reminds us that human beings are bound together by something he called sympathy, by placing ourselves in the other person's situation and seeing through their eyes. Thus, our interest becomes their interest. Indeed, if sympathy means caring truly and actively about the other fellow's wants and needs, then no one is more sympathetic than the entrepreneurial businessman who gets ahead by supplying the needs and wants of others.
I like what he's saying here because, like Ayn Rand, he's saying capitalism is an extremely moral economic system. that it gives people more benefits. It makes people wealthier. It increases prosperity. It makes nations and individuals richer. We should not be embarrassed about free enterprise. Communism brings slavery. Capitalism and free enterprise, not crony capitalism, but true free enterprise capitalism, brings freedom and prosperity.
Others who must choose voluntarily to transact with him because what they get from him is worth more than what it costs. And that is the nature of free enterprise business. If you want to sell what the consumer buys, you have to see through the consumer's eyes. Smith did not invent the free market economy. He discovered it just at the moment in history when these economies were embracing it over serfdom. So we can compare the before and after to see which approach worked. Before 1776, there was literally no economic growth. Estimates by Angus Madison show that between the year 1 and the year 1700, per capita GDP measured in 1990 dollars grew from about $444 to $615 in 1700 years, meaning barely any growth in living standards in those 17 centuries. From 1820 to 2000, per capita GDP went from $667 to $5,700. Now let me put this into context. On average, in the free market period, the economy would grow as much in 1 year as it would have grown in the average 200 years in the pre-free market period. Life expectancy literally doubled from the year 1800 to 75 from 35. And then there's transportation. Winston Churchill famously noted that Sir Robert Peel in 1841 took just as long to go from London to Rome as a Roman Empire would have taken to go from Rome to London 2,000 years or earlier. In other words, there was literally no improvement in transportation technology in that 2 millennia. Then, in a little more than a century, we went from horses and sailboats to jet engines and men on the moon. More advancement in a century and a half of free enterprise than in the prior 2,000 years combined.
That is pivotal. That is incredibly true. And that is what Pierre Poilievre, I think, is articulating that other politicians aren't getting right now. Capitalism, free enterprise, has given us opportunity. Communism brings nothing but poverty and wealth for a few elites. And we're going to listen now to an interview that Mr. Poilievre did with a UK broadcast entitled Triggermometry. I haven't watched a lot of that show, but it's fantastic dialogue. And what Pierre Poilievre says in this interview is extremely profound. As he says, what crony capitalism under people like Mark Carney is bringing us is once again, yes, we will be showing you the Magna Carta, a wonderful moment. I was so impressed with this. Absolutely wonderful moment. And this is absolutely essential to Pierre Poilievre winning this next election, because the Conservative Party has to be a party of freedom. And as he says in this, I think it's not the next clip, but it's the one after, we have a choice between our own freedom or the government once again taking our money and giving it to their friends in the elite. And Mark Carney is part of that elite. He's part of that group that has been named and listed in those Jeffrey E. files that, of course, we're not talking about anymore, are we? Because of other issues in the news. Yeah. And this is why I'm very impressed with this, because I've read The Wealth of Nations by Adam Smith. I've read Free to Choose by Milton Friedman when I was 12 years old. Yes, I did. That's what I was interested in at that age. I read The Wealth of Nations when I was in grade 11 or 12. And I used to have an Adam Smith tie. In those days, that's what a neoconservative was. Not what it is now, which means somebody who wants endless foreign wars. A neoconservative in those days was somebody who had rediscovered classical liberalism and the free enterprise economy, unencumbered by government intervention. That's what it meant in those days. And I think Pierre Poilievre definitely was on the same trajectory. So let's listen to this exchange here, because this is Pierre Poilievre absolutely saying no to Mark Carney's New World Order with China.
I think we need to trade and talk with China.
Yeah.
The Chinese people constitute a brilliant and extraordinary civilization. There's no denying it. And if we're being honest about it, they've been outworking, out-hustling, the people of China, but outworking, out-hustling those of us in the West for the last 3 decades. It's incredible, really. China went from a country with 80% of the population living on less than $1 a day to the second biggest economy in one lifetime. So you can't ignore them. But the idea that we can have a permanent rupture with our closest neighbor and biggest customer in favor of a strategic partnership for a new world order with China is not on. It's just not going to happen. We sell 20 times as much to the Americans as we do to the Chinese. American capitalism is the single biggest economic force in the history of the world. And they live right next door. So we need to have a solid friendship, free trade agreement, and of course, security partnership with the United States.
Why do I feel? Well, no, not why. I do feel synchronicity with Pierre Poilievre right now, because it's exactly what we have been saying on these broadcasts ever since Mark Carney announced this new world order with China, which is, of course, absolute nonsense at perhaps the least offensive, but dangerous. We cannot turn our backs on our greatest military ally and economic trading partner. It's not just stupidity. It's unreal. Geographically, we are attached to the United States. They are our greatest trading partner, our closest military ally. And anybody who's ever served in the military knows full well how close an ally they are, not just because of our mutual membership in NATO, not just because we are both members of NORAD, the only 2 members of NORAD, by the way, but we have continental defense agreements, and we do military exchanges with the United States on a regular basis. And that is why it is not just foolhardy, but completely unrealistic to view the United States somehow as an existential threat when they've been our greatest friend. Throughout the Cold War, we lived under the U.S. nuclear umbrella. That was called protection. And that's why we cannot forget that reality. So here's some more from that interview. And this is fascinating to me because what did I say during the whole federal election, last year's federal election? Don't get dragged into this anti-American, anti-Trump thing that Mark Carney is using to win an election by isolating the Conservative Party and putting Pierre Poilievre into an impossible corner. That's what that was all about. Mark Carney, of course, elbows up BS throughout the campaign, never serious. As soon as the campaign was over and he had won, it was time to nuzzle close to President Donald Trump and say, hey, it was all in jest. We were just kidding. We were just kidding about that existential threat. And Mark Carney, of course, almost literally kneeling before President Trump at those White House meetings where he called him like a president who was transformative and transformational. Remember that? Well, of course, Carney's back there again, and too many Canadians are falling for this nonsense. Don't fall for it. Tell your friends how not. And here's Pierre Poilievre acknowledging that he got caught up in that in the last election, and it did not help his chances of winning.
Well, listen, I think the biggest phenomenon in the Western world over the last decade or two has been the total betrayal of the working class, the people who make stuff, fix stuff, move stuff, and build stuff. The younger people who are entering the job market and trying to start.
Oh, just a sec. This is the clip I wanted to show you here.
I think a former prime minister of Canada described the relationship being next to the U.S. You like quoting this, like sleeping next to an elephant. Doesn't matter how peaceful it is, every twitch and grunt affects you.
Right.
I put it to you, the elephant is wide awake now, and it's it's stomping around, and you might like that, you might dislike that, but is Trump's behavior towards Canada the reason you didn't become prime minister?
Well, the challenge for me was it was very hard to focus on the very powerful domestic case we had. I mean, if you looked at the situation in Canada, the housing costs had doubled, so had the food bank lineups. I mean, we've got 2.2 million food bank visits every single month. Wow. A violent crime up 50%, the immigration system in shambles. And we wanted to focus the election on that. It became very difficult with the sound and fury of the Canada-U.S. debate. So my focus now is, what do I do from here? How do I go forward? And obviously, our trade relationship with the U.S. is up for review. We have a free trade agreement that effectively dates back to the Mulroney era in the late 80s, early 90s. That has largely remained intact, but that relationship is being renewed in the summer. And so what we have to do as Canadians is be stronger at home so that we have unbreakable leverage in any negotiations that come on that relationship. And we've got a lot of leverage. I mean, a lot of people underestimate Canada, but we've got the fourth biggest oil supply. We've got 10 of the 12 NATO defense critical minerals. We've got the second biggest landmass, biggest oceanic coastline. We should be leveraging all of that power to get what we want, which is basically tariff-free trade with our American friends. And that's the approach I'm going to be taking going forward.
Well, you pivoted very well from my question, but it sounds like the Trump behavior was not helpful to your election. Is that fair to say?
I acknowledge that by saying I wanted to be talking
right.
about how we could make people's lives better on immigration, cost of living, housing, crime, all of that. But it was very hard to do that when obviously the debate was
Trump
going
was talking about how you should become a state,
which is never going to
United
happen.
Right.
Which is never going to happen.
Right.
And everybody knows it's never going to happen.
And do you think he meant it, or was it one of his trolly comments that he throws out there?
Well, the Liberal government in Canada said that it was a joke at the time. But what I would say is we can't control President Trump.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
I think it's very clear. And actually, our prime minister has acknowledged that. So that's one thing we actually agree on. But so, very stoically, we have to focus on the things we can control.
Right.
So maybe I was right at the time. And it's interesting that he's acknowledging that. And I just say again, don't get yourself roped into this again when we have the next election, because we could be having one very shortly. With numbers like this, you think Mark Carney is probably going to jump at the chance. So Pierre Poilievre must not get in the ring with Mark Carney and start slugging it out with Donald Trump. It doesn't work. Focus on how bad Canada has become under almost 11 years of liberal tyranny. Focus on how bad the economy is. Focus on how corrupt this government is. Don't let Mark Carney set the parameters for this next federal election. And here's, I think, perhaps the best part of this interview.
Well, listen, I think the biggest phenomenon in the Western world over the last decade or two has been the total betrayal of the working class, the people who make stuff, fix stuff, move stuff.
Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. In the last election, there was huge inroads made by the Conservative Party with working class Canadians, with blue collar workers. Poilievre wants to build on that. Keep building on that. A lot of working class Canadians who used to vote for the New Democratic Party are voting Conservative because they see them as a common sense alternative. And they want to make money. They want to be prosperous. They don't want the state taking away all of their income through taxes. And let's listen to some more.
And build stuff. The younger people who are entering the job market and trying to start a life, who have seen their opportunities absolutely destroyed by massive government interventions that have concentrated wealth among a very small group of well-connected insiders. And that, I think, has caused enormous amounts of political instability. It has caused a resurgence of both socialism and of protectionism. And now is a time, I think, for us to push back against that betrayal and give people back control of their lives. And that is true right across the Western world. It's especially true in Canada. We need to restore home ownership, bring back sound money, allow people to actually benefit from their hard work, and basically restore meritocracy, which was the very principle, the driving principle of Western economics for 2.5 centuries. So I think that's really the big question of how whether or not the Western world is going to reinstate meritocratic free enterprise, or whether it's going to continue to concentrate undeserved benefits through state capitalism and big government.
Well, on the cultural level as well, a lot of things seem to have happened. I mean, you talk about free enterprise, but what about just people being free to speak their mind, to make their own decisions? One of the things that we were frankly truly horrified by, even given that COVID restrictions in this country were pretty stringent, is...
And this is great because this touches on free speech, which we talk about every day on this station. Well, this is also Pierre Poilievre's reiteration of his support for the Freedom Convoy.
Some of the things that happened, people who were protesting against things in Canada having their bank accounts taken away. We had supporters of our show writing in going like, please, can you cover this? Is there something about Canada that make the Canadian psyche that made you guys more susceptible to this? Is it just you had a particular leader at that time who was more authoritative? Like, what was that about?
It was the government itself. It wasn't broadly the people. The truckers in question, they were just looking to be heard. Most of these people had never protested anything in their lives. Through the early COVID days, they were considered the heroes because they were literally driving on lonely highways across international borders, often for weeks away from their families in total isolation, bringing us the things to our homes that we could not live without. And then when the time came for them to be heard, the government robbed them of their liberties. And by the way, this is no longer a controversial view. I think it's the federal court now has ruled that the use of the Emergency Act to crack down on the protest was a violation of Canada's Charter of Rights and Freedoms. So it has even been accepted by the judiciary that was wrong. And it's a reminder of why we need to, the government has to treat itself as the servant and not the master. And we need to...
I have to say, throughout this debate, Poilievre has been very focused on the truth and has been consistent in his support of the Freedom Convoy and of his opposition to the persecution of Freedom Convoy organizers like Tamara Leach and Chris Barber, because he recognized that they were political opponents of the Liberal regime and were being punished as political opponents.
To give a bigger voice to the working people of our country who, in this case, were simply looking for the right to speak, to the freedom of mobility and bodily autonomy.
And you say, it wasn't the people, but we have to be honest, Pierre. I mean, Trudeau did get re-elected.
Not after that. No, he was basically, he had to...
Now, Justin Trudeau was re-elected twice, but Pierre is correct in saying his last re-election did not occur after he invoked the Emergencies Act. That's quite true.
Leave office, extremely unpopular. So he did not get reelected after the use of the Emergency Act against the truckers.
Oh, right, but he did.
Yeah.
But I was saying that he did get re-elected shortly after the COVID measures and everything like that. So it's not as if it was totally against the will of the people, is my point.
Yeah, I wouldn't attribute it to that. And the Canadian people value their freedoms, and I was very outspoken in favor of individual freedom, not just on the issue of the pandemic, but more broadly on economics, and won a lot of support, so much so that the Liberal Party later then claimed that it was going to adopt many of my policies. So I think the agenda of giving people more freedom, economic freedom through lower taxes, unlocking home ownership and energy and resource development, or personal freedom by letting people speak their minds and have freedom of speech, even when it's politically incorrect. I actually think that agenda is very popular in Canada and around the world, and that's why I've stayed true to it.
Because it's been.
Well, that's not why I've stayed true to it. It's one of the. It makes it easier for me to stay true to it. Sorry.
Fair enough, but
yeah.
It's been very disheartening and actually quite upsetting to watch what Canada has become and the trajectory it's gone on. Because as somebody who's from the UK, I've seen the exact same trajectory we're on. And I look at Europe and the same thing is happening in Europe. And you're kind of thinking to yourself, why is this? Why are we on this trajectory? When to even the most basic of laymen, it seems like we're heading on a path of self-destruction.
If you look at it, what it really comes down to is this. It's freedom or force.
There it is. It's freedom or force. That, to me, encapsulates everything Pierre Poilievre is saying in this interview and on his recent European tour. That encapsulates what he's saying, and I think he needs to say that every day. That's what has been successful for Pierre Poilievre in the past. That's what will be successful for him going forth. Focus on freedom and how these liberals under Justin Trudeau and then Mark Carney are taking our fundamental freedoms away and not allowing us to be free.
There's a movement to concentrate power, control, money in the hands of bureaucrats, technocrats, and other insiders using the state as their mechanism. And that has led to the mass impoverishment of the people across the Western world and an enormous gap between rich and poor. By the way, this is not happening because of free enterprise. It's happening because of the massive interventions of the state to take from the hardworking many and concentrate it in the hands of the few. On the other hand, there's another alternative, which is to give people back more economic, personal, and political freedom through a smaller state and more powerful individuals, families, and communities. And that's the side I'm on.
Well, you're focusing on the narrow economic part of it, but I think what Francis is alluding to is there's
the same thing, though.
Well, is it though? Because there's a cultural and ideological dimension to this as well. Because, say, the policy of net zero, which is just economic suicide.
One of the best sections here. Total attack on the net zero fallacy, the net zero scam, which what Donald Trump calls the green scam. Poilievre comes close to actually using that kind of language, almost, but not quite, but it's good.
The same thing, tell us.
Exactly the same thing,
How
because
so?
it's being used as a pretext to concentrate money and power in the hands of the state. It is just the latest of the many pretexts that are used to justify taking away everybody's money and giving it to a treasured, privileged few, green grifters. The corporatism of saying, well, we're going to tax all of the energy and we're going to block the resources, and then we're going to take the money and give it to the government, who's going to dole it out to all of these corporate insiders who claim that they are doing something for the environment. When in fact, if you look very carefully, it's all BS. In fact, they have no problem directing much of that money to China, which is opening 2 coal fire plants a week, So it has nothing to do with the environment. It is entirely a pretext to take from the working classes and give to a small group of insiders through the mechanism of the state. So whether you're talking about the net zero fraud or massive government redistribution schemes or just an overall growth in the bureaucracy, it is all, or even on the speech side, it's all about concentrating power and money in the hands of fewer and fewer people while taking away the opportunities of the people who actually do the work.
Wow. Now that's impressive. I think that's as good as the term green scam. Called it BS, called it nonsense. Identified it for what it is, a means to take your money away, to put the government's hand in your pocket because it's all good for the environment and it's all nonsense. Now, while Pierre Poilievre was over in the UK, in Great Britain, he made a very significant stop to the site of the signing of the Magna Carta. This really impressed me because, of course, what is going on right now in Canada, that is one of the most important issues. We're fighting for our very basic liberties in this country. We're fighting to save free speech from a ravenous federal government that wants to destroy our free speech. It wants to censor us and survey us and keep us under the thumb of government. And this is why we're fighting that. So I think we have that clip. I wasn't able to get it all together, but producer, have we got that clip now of Pierre Poilievre?
No free man shall be seized or imprisoned, or stripped of his rights or possessions, or outlawed or exiled, or deprived of his standing in any way, nor will we proceed with force against him, or send others to do so, except by the lawful judgment of his equals, or by the law of the land. A reflection of our ancient English liberties into our present-day ideals. Did you ever wonder why the House of Commons is green? Because it first met in the green fields of England. Fields like this one, Runnymede. This was the place that the Anglo-Saxon Assembly, the Witan, met to advise the king. In fact, the name Runnymede means the meadow where counsel is taken. It was the first proto-parliament right here in these hills. And it is in this field that the Magna Carta, the great charter, was born. This is the place in June 1215 where barons forced King John to sign the great charter. 800 years later, we still look back at this document signed in this place as a turning point in the history of freedom and the rule of law. Well, many of the more than 60 clauses of the Magna Carta have fallen out of use or been replaced. Some of them are a little hard to understand. Talk of fish weirs and wapentakes, whatever those are, seem irrelevant today. But if you squint hard, you can peer through the Old English and ancient disputes and see the familiar and cherished rights that we take for granted today. No arrest without charge, trial without jury, confiscation without compensation, and my favorite, one the Americans think they invented but started right here in these fields, no taxation without representation. A ban on the aristocracy stealing firewood from landowners is one of the earliest examples of what we now call property rights. And what is most interesting is that the document barely asks the king to do anything at all or give anything to the barons. It asks him to stop doing harm, and mostly just leave people alone. It imposed restraints on the power of the crown. And this is the most revolutionary part of the deal, because before that, there were no...
Want to comment there, because do you remember when Pierre Poilievre used to talk about a government that minds its own business? He's on track again. That's precisely what he says here. No, not precisely, but it's another way of saying, I want a government that minds its own business. Get out of our lives.
Legal restraints on the king. He was above the law. But after Magna Carta, no one, not even the king, was above the law. Thus began the journey towards what today we call liberty under law, a journey that took several more centuries of civil war and a lot of evolution, a journey that is still not complete today, but one that started right here. Our Constitution is not a carbon copy of the Magna Carta, but it inherits its DNA, so much so that our own Supreme Court recognized this important evolution when it said the evolution of our democratic tradition can be traced back to Magna Carta. For example, it guaranteed that the king will, quote, not deny or defer any man either justice or right. This is the basis of what we now call due process, or Article 7 of our Charter, which says that every person is entitled to the principles of fundamental justice. Although the Magna Carta was a compact between the king and the English barons, the 1% of medieval England, if you will, its compact was not limited just to the elite. Many of the rights and privileges it secured applied to all free men, or in some cases, only men. But as the years went by, as the centuries progressed, what started as rights and freedoms for the few gradually grew and grew to the many, and now today for all.
Great segment, and as we said, there will be information in the description where you can watch that whole video, as well as the whole interview on trigonometry, which is well worth watching. And so we're going to go to our merchandise now, and I'll be back with some more of your comments and some concluding statements.
Who cares?
The best way you can support this station and the independent work of journalism, the work of independent journalism that I hope I'm providing for you, is to buy merchandise from the store if you can afford it, if you like the merchandise. But that's the simplest and easiest way to help this station out, this program out, this channel out. And I certainly would appreciate it. And we're going to go to some of your comments now, because we've generated a lot of comments in the last, goodness, we've been on 53 minutes. I thought this was going to be a quick broadcast, but lots to talk about. Now, do we have any more comments? Yes, I have felt a renewed sense of patriotism this week. God bless Pierre. Yes, God bless Pierre. Keep talking that way, Pierre. Keep fighting for freedom. Don't let yourself be corralled by the communications department of the Conservative Party who tell you, play it safe. Stick to the talking points. No, you don't need to do that. Trudeau was Canada's queen. KRPM1XG. Trudeau was Canada's queen. Carney would be king, but husband, wife is a man. So we're not sure what that makes him. Yeah, that's McPherson Jonathan. Anybody that voted for Carney, please wake up. Canada is dying. We will have no hope, no freedom, nothing to live for. How can you not see that? I don't know how they can't see that. Stand on guard with me. Hey, must be a real devotee of this station. Due process has failed every Canadian citizen. We need a better system, not that old Westminster form of governance where we've all seen where that leads. Maybe we do need a complete overhaul. We need to focus on where we go. Kim L. Chuck Hardy, we the people have no property rights in this regime. Absolutely none, you're right. The CFIA, RCMP, JN DRIP, and that's of course that's the Aboriginal title, and that have plainly shown us. Watch what happens if you don't pay the Crown your rent on the land you were deceived into believing you bought. That, of course, is a direct reference to what's happening in British Columbia, the erosion of property rights. The federal government recently gave away most of the city of Vancouver to 1,200 people belonging to one First Nations band. That is not just stupid, it's a crime. Liberals hate the truth even more than receipts. Trees 14. And you comment so much, Trees. Thank you so much for your comments. And that last commentator, I can tell you're obviously following what's happening in Edgewood, BC. Majestic 12, Carney is removing free speech with all the hate speech bills, all the talking points on children. Those laws already exist. It's all censorship. Worse, it's so ambiguous they don't define. No, they don't define it because they just want to take away your freedom. And ultimately, that's what this is about. Green energy, another one from Majestic 12. Green energy gives at most 30% energy. It's wasteful. It's even more toxic waste. Those windmills never deteriorate nor reuse for anything. Lithium batteries made by children, mined by children. Yes. All very true. So, I hope you enjoyed where we went today with, and once I say again, when Pierre Poilievre gets it right, I'll say Pierre Poilievre got it right. Good for you. But as an independent journalist, I'm not working for Pierre Poilievre. I'm working for you and I. And occasionally, sometimes we have to push in the other direction. And that's what I do. But it's all because I believe in freedom. So thank you for watching. I remind you again, please hold my mother, Elizabeth, up in prayer. Tim, I'm in Ottawa, but I am going to try to make that. We will see. I'm not going to say can't do it. There's no such thing as can do. I might have to go out to BC, actually. So I wasn't aware there was a protest at BC Human Rights Tribunal. But 2 weeks from now, yeah, that would be about the beginning of spring. Maybe that would be representative of a new spring in this country. And once again, thank you for your prayers for my mother, Elizabeth, who's in Chilliwack General Hospital right now, facing death. And I thank you so much for all of those of you who are praying and supporting me at this very, very difficult time. It is so appreciated. God bless you. And Godspeed to all of your activities and all of your ambitions. Thank you so much for watching. We'll be back again tomorrow, 10 o'clock Eastern Time. Thank you for sharing this station with your friends and family. Thank you for hitting that like button, because I tell you, we are fighting back in a way I've never had to before, because I'm going to keep this station on the air. I am going to keep fighting for freedom. I'm going to keep fighting for justice and truth. And I am damn determined to resist this Carney government in any way possible as it encroaches upon our individual freedom. And it will continue to do that, mark my words. I'll be back again tomorrow. Same time, same place. 10 a.m. This has been David KRAYDEN, broadcasting live from our nation's capital in Ottawa. Thank you for watching. We'll see you again tomorrow.